ask your questions is through the Q&A box, the little feature there in Zoom at the bottom. So you can put your questions in that way, and I will address them either during the workshop or after the workshop is over. But I promise I will not, um, I will not, I won't leave until all the questions are answered. So we'll make sure we get everything addressed. The chat is open. Please, be kind and respectful with each other. Feel free to use emojis since I can't see you. I will be sending around the recording, the link to the recording, and a link to the slide deck, along with some other links that I'll mention in this workshop. So you don't have to worry about taking notes or anything. You'll get that tomorrow, usually, mid to late morning. And if you haven't introduced yourself yet and you still would like to, please feel free to use the chat. And let's get started. So today we're talking about scripts. And I think of it as like when your past speaks before you do. And this is those things where you've agreed to something that you didn't want to do and walked away wondering, why did I say that? So we're going to talk about that today and how they've come to be, how you got them, and how you can begin the process of rewriting them. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Jeremy Schneider. I am a social worker. I'm a family therapist. I'm a certified life coach. I've written a book called Fatherhood in 40-Minute Snapshots. My memoir, In My Rearview Mirror, is being published winter 2026, which is just a few months away, which is hard to believe. I do a lot of workshops like this, as you can imagine. Right now, I'm doing about 3 workshops a month or so. Though I'm in a good stretch right now where I'm probably doing about 5 or 6 workshops in a row. And I do self-care. I did a workshop on self-compassion last week. I'm doing this one on overcoming trauma and scripts. I also do some work around AI and mental health. And in fact, I have a regular column in Psychology Today where I talk about using AI for your mental health. I've created a framework called the integration path, which is how you become more integrated as a person. And this is for people who have struggled with trauma, who've experienced trauma growing up. I also write a lot, a lot. So I've got a lot of articles out there. I've also created some free guides, and I joke about them being like the free mental health starter pack. So I have a free guide on self-care, I have a free guide on self-awareness, and I have a free guide on getting started with mindfulness meditation. Again, they're free. Just you're signing up for my newsletters, really all you're doing. If you sign up and don't get the guide, just let me know. You can contact me. Either my email address will be on the slides, or you can reach out to me through Meetup or whatever. So the link is here, but also you can use the QR code. And let's get started. So let's start with what are scripts. The reason I think about scripts, or the reason I termed them scripts, is because it's really like you're reading from a script. It's like you're following your role in a play. They're automatic responses. They're not things that you really think about. They're not conscious. They're not things that you've want necessarily even want to do, but they happen so smoothly and easily. It feels very natural, but in reality, it's something that you've essentially absorbed through repetition. You've learned it from parents, from society, from other caregivers, etc. The challenge with scripts is that it's layered learning. So it's not like at 7 years old, someone handed you a script and said, memorize this. It was basically like at every moment you were growing up and developing, as your brain was developing, people were slipping you lines on what to say or how to say it, or how to respond, how to deal with this situation. And it feels indistinguishable from who you are as a person. It is very different than who you are as a person. I'll talk more about that, but it's challenging to see the distinction between who you are and the scripts that you've been taught. And as I mentioned before, these are unconscious patterns, right? These are not things that you're choosing to do. These are situations, responses that happen automatically, and they happen before you even have a chance to think about them. And that's the key. That's why I think of them as scripts. It's like you know your lines so well, you don't even have to think about saying them. Scripts often come from experiences that are along the trauma spectrum. So let's talk a little bit about trauma. According to the American Psychological Association, trauma is an emotional response to a deeply distressing or disturbing event. But it's not just the event itself, it's how we experience the event and it's the impact that it's had on us. So that's the tricky part about traumatic experiences is what may be traumatic for someone may not be traumatic for me and vice versa. And so it's hard to predict. Certainly, the worse a situation is, the more likely it is to be traumatic. But because of our personalities, our genetic makeup, because of our families, because of all these different experiences, how we respond to difficult experiences determines how traumatic it is for us. But fundamentally, if you've had a traumatic experience, it's leaving some emotional and physical imprint. And it's not something that you are aware of. It is not something you're conscious of. And so part of what I'll be talking about is how do you begin to become more self-aware of how you're being impacted, for instance, by your past. So let's talk a little bit about the different types of trauma, and they all happen to focus around T's. So the trauma spectrum, there's big T trauma. This is the stuff that you know about, right? This is the abuse, violence. This is catastrophic loss. This is, um, the loss of a parent. It's these devastating type of events that clearly shift your entire developmental process. And that's essentially another good way of thinking about what is trauma is that if you're on a regular path for childhood development, for brain development, for emotional development, a traumatic event pushes you off that path. Excuse me. So a big T trauma, right? That's a huge shove. It changes everything. It changes how your brain processes everything moving forward. For something like small T trauma, where we're talking about maybe things that are a little more subtle, maybe it's like emotional neglect, maybe it is the collection of events that have built up over time. Whereas if you took one memory and you talked about that one memory, maybe it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but you multiply that by 1,000 times that you experienced throughout your childhood, then you're really starting to talk about that is pushing you off of your kind of normal developmental process. Then there's something called adversity, which is some of the things that you also don't have control over. This is poverty, it's discrimination, it's chronic stress, it's health issues. These kinds of things that still weigh on you, they still have a tremendous impact on you. But again, they don't quite sort of stereotypically seem traumatic. And what's important to understand is that wherever your experiences might fall on the spectrum, it's to understand that what you experience matters, right? When we demean and belittle our difficult experiences in life, it makes it more difficult for us to heal, and it makes it more difficult for us to understand their impact in order to be able to make changes in our life to make that better. I hope that makes sense about trauma. So there, there's been a theory about healing from trauma, which is really has been focused on kind of diving into your deep, dark memories and trying to uncover everything that you've been through and kind of reliving it all. And it's not that that is wrong. It's just that that's not the only way. And one of the things that I'm going to talk about today is really focusing on how do you recognize how your past impacts your present, right? And so really what we most of us experience who've experienced difficult things in childhood, we can seem okay, but we have difficulty in certain situations or with certain people because of the way that we're triggered by it, the way that our past impacts us. And that's how it shows itself. And one of the ways that we see that is in the way that our scripts play out. So there's no miracle cure for dealing with trauma, for overcoming trauma. But I will tell you, it begins with self-awareness. Self-awareness is the most important thing for you to learn if you want to really move forward on the journey of healing from trauma. So let's take a little bit of time to talk about what is self-awareness. This is like my sweet spot. This is something that I think about a lot, I care about a lot, I write about a lot, I do workshops on. This is like something that I think is fundamental to the healing process. So self-awareness is not just like being aware, right? It's the ability to be able to observe, to understand and regulate your own thinking processes, and also to be able to do the same for your emotional experiences. It's not just enough to be able to, oh, look, I'm feeling this way. It's to be able to, oh, look, I'm feeling this way. This is why I'm feeling this way. This is what it connects me to. And now I can do something in order to manage that. So I talk a lot about emotional management and intelligent management, right? So it's managing our thoughts and our feelings. Self-awareness is key to being able to make that happen. The important element of that, right, is to just be able to take a look inward, see what we're experiencing, and begin to try and ask questions about it. One of there's a few reasons why self-awareness really matters so much. One is it creates space. And what I mean by that is our scripts get triggered like that. So I don't know how much you know about the brain, and I'm certainly no expert on the brain, but the way information travels to our brain, it goes through our amygdala, which is our kind of alert system, our alarm system. That's where fight or flight instincts come into play, right? So we initially interpret things through that, and then it comes to our prefrontal cortex where we have a chance to actually think about it and consider it. Our scripts are essentially based in our amygdala. That comes from our amygdala process, right? We experience something, it frightens us, it makes us uncomfortable, it puts us in a difficult situation, whatever it is. Our alert system goes, which is a terrible sound, and you shouldn't repeat that, but it makes a terrible sound right in our heads. And then it says, okay, well, what do I do? Here's the script that we should follow in order to get out of this okay. The problem is that could be like with a boss who you have no emotional history with, but it just feels so similar to what you had, to an experience you had growing up, that that's how you respond. Self-awareness allows you to notice that that triggering has happened, be able to pause, and be able to choose your own response. So you can see that's the next part, right? So much of what we do is react. We're reacting to things primarily based out of the way our past has impacted us. So if we tend to be more fearful because of the way we grew up, then we're reacting from a kind of desperate place to find safety. We're reacting out of a way to protect ourselves. That's where we follow those scripts of, okay, this is what we do to keep ourselves safe. This is what we do to protect ourselves. This is what we do to get out of this situation, right? Self-awareness allows us to be able to notice that and then choose our response. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to do that. Self-awareness also allows us to be able to heal from trauma because it helps us understand what happened to us. This was our experience. Of course, that's why in these types of situations we get scared. Even though as an adult we have nothing to worry about, of course we get scared because that was very scary for us when we were younger. And that was how our brain was developed. And so being able to be more understanding about the way you react and about how you handle situations reduces anxiety and also makes it easier to be self-compassionate, which is an extremely powerful tool to help heal yourself. And then, of course, self-awareness allows you to gain insight as to the types of situations when this happens, the types of people that this happens with, the thinking patterns that develop that cause trouble. All of these things to help you be aware of, okay, this is the type of situation I need to prepare myself for because I'm more likely to be triggered, to have a script start. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Let's get into a little bit more detail about what I term the awareness arc. Okay. It's three simple questions: why, what, now what? So, why is that initial, okay, I have this experience, I have this feeling. I'm not sure what it is, but clearly it's a sign that something isn't okay. Okay. That's how self-awareness begins. You just ask, wait, why am I reacting to this way? My boss, I wrote an article recently about how your brain lies. And so don't believe everything you think. And the example that I used is my boss used to send someone I used to work for, used to send me an email that would say, please see me in blue. And it was always like, oh my God, something is terribly wrong, right? I had no idea. It could have been about like football, right? It didn't have to do anything with me, but my brain, of course, immediately assumed something was wrong. So what I can do is think, well, why am I reacting this way? Oh, because I feel like I'm putting myself in a threatening situation. Okay, great. What do I need or want in this situation? Well, partly I want to feel safe, but partly I also want to respond to my boss like an adult versus feeling like I'm a kid, right? So how can I go about doing that? What do I need to be able to do that? And then the now what? Okay, so I understand the why, I understand what, and now what can I do about it to help myself? So how can I go into that meeting feeling better prepared in order to be able to handle the situation better? It's obviously more complex than this, but hopefully this gives you a sense of how you can begin the awareness process. A couple things to remember. One, this is a muscle. This is not something that you may have really used much before, and certainly not to this degree. And so it's going to take some time to build up this muscle. And the only way that you can do that is practice. So you just got to keep trying and trying and trying. Anytime you experience something, ask yourself why, ask yourself what, ask yourself now what. Especially in the beginning, you may notice that it's really hard to catch scripts in the moment. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. But you may not notice that a script played out until after it's over, until you've walked away from that situation. That's fine. You used to never be able to notice it at all. So every time that you notice it, that's progress. And the you're strengthening that muscle, and the stronger that muscle gets, the better you're going to get at this, right? So don't worry about that. Again, I'm going to keep emphasizing the importance of self-compassion. Be kind to yourself, be thoughtful to yourself, right? This is this is big stuff that you're undertaking here, and it's not gonna happen right away. You will be able to get to the point if you keep doing it that you'll notice scripts either shortly after they happen or even while they're happening. And you'll be able to pause and within that same situation be able to make changes. Excuse me, but you don't have to worry about that right now. You just want to practice this. You just want to build this muscle up as best as you can. And remember, self-awareness is all about giving yourself a sense of freedom. It's a freedom of choice in how you want to respond, right? It's the freedom to be able to write your own script of how you want things to play out instead of following what you learned when you were a child. Excuse me. So let's talk a little bit about the different types of script genres. So scripts can start playing out for any number of reasons. Here are just a few examples. When someone asks you to do something, that can trigger a script within you because maybe you learned that when someone asks for something, you kind of have to do it. Like you don't really have a choice, or that there's a certain way that you have to respond, right? That's a script. For how you respond to authority, I talked about bosses, things like that, right? How you deal with that, you probably have a script for that. And being able to have, and sometimes you probably walk away feeling like, oh, why did I say that? Why did I do this? And that's because you're just following a script and you're not aware of it yet. You can have scripts for how you talk to a new person or how you talk to a partner, how you manage your relationships. You can have scripts for how you handle difficult emotions, which may very well be run and hide. It may be bury that so that you can never see it again. But that's still a script. Again, it's not necessarily a healthy script, but it's a script, right? For prioritizing others over self. So, I have like one of the this is one for me, for example. Other is more important than self. That's one of my kind of defining scripts. And so that's been an area of work for me over the, decades of my existence. And whether or not you advocate for yourself is another script. Do you defend yourself? Do you ask for what you want and what you feel like you deserve? Right? We have scripts to handle all of those situations. We're just not aware of any of them. And so again, this self-awareness, this building of this muscle is going to allow you to be able to do that and see when these scripts are coming into play more so that you can then do something about them. Excuse me. So I talked a little bit about this. Scripts form in a multiple variety of ways. One of them is just like the explicit teaching that we learn, right? Say thank you, be respectful, say sir or madam or whatever it happens to be, right? These explicit things that our parents or caregivers taught us to do. There's the modeling component, right? We'll learn how to navigate conflict, often by the way our caregivers navigate or don't navigate conflict. We'll stand up for ourselves in similar ways to the way that our caregivers stood up for themselves or allowed us to stand up for ourselves, right? And it can also be the subtle things, the like don't rock the boat, meaning, don't stand out, stay small, don't don't ask for what you want. And then particularly when there's more trauma involved, it's the protection element. It's how do I keep myself safe? How do I hide when there's too many people? Or how do I deal with pain? Or how do I focus on what other people want in order to make them feel better so that they don't bother me, they don't hurt me, right? There's lots of different ways that this plays out. Um, I guess I want to pause. I don't see any other questions at this point, but again, if you have questions, feel free to submit them through the Q&A feature, and I'll keep going. Excuse me. So let me tell you a little story as to what scripts actually really looks like. I was in my mid 20s, late 20s. I had just come out of the darkest period of my life, and I was trying to figure out kind of what am I going to do? I hadn't been working for a long time. I had been really depressed for quite a while. And like I was just trying to figure out how do I kind of begin to get myself back into society. And I'd always been fascinated by flowers and floral arrangements. And I was like, hey, maybe I could volunteer at a florist for a couple days and get a feel for what that is, learn about it. And I'd also have something to do a couple days a week, get myself out of the apartment. It would be good. So I reached out to a few florists. One of them got back to me and invited me in for an interview. And I walked out having agreed to work 9 to 5 every single day for free. That was not my intention. That was not what I wanted. And I was so upset when I left. And it was really difficult. I really struggled. I remember calling my dad like in a bit of a panic, trying to figure out what to do. I thought this would be a good example to kind of walk through the awareness arc and kind of I didn't know this back then, but this was how I started to develop the script theory, to be honest. But if I had known, this is how I could have used this awareness arc idea, right? So the why was, why did I walk out of there feeling so uncomfortable, so upset, right? What was happening in my mind that made me feel this badly, basically, right? So that was the why. Why am I feeling this badly? And the what was trying to figure out, okay, so what happened was I came in with a goal, but I didn't get what I wanted. He got what he wanted, the florist. I didn't know what to do. I had ended up in this difficult position. And so the what again was really focused on kind of what does this mean? What happened? What do I need to understand so that I can do the now what, which is so now that I understand what happened, now that I understand why I'm feeling this way, how it impacted me. So for me, in that scenario, the other more important than self script absolutely took over, right? He wanted me to work 5 days a week for free. So that's what I was going to do. It didn't matter what I wanted, right? That's how that script works for me. So then the now what was, okay, well, I'm now in this difficult position, but what I want is I don't want to work full time for somebody for free. That's not going to be good for me, particularly at that point in my life. That wasn't going to be healthy for me. So what I ended up doing was I called him and I told him I can't do this full time, but if you still want me to do it 1 or 2 days a week, I'm still interested. That's kind of how the awareness arc comes into play when scripts are triggered. And so I do this all the time in my life, right? Because I've done a lot of work on myself and I've learned a lot about this and certainly teach a lot about it, but stuff still happens, right? And so always trying to apply this process so that I can understand why I'm feeling this way, what happened, and then what can I now do in order to still give myself what I need and what I want. So I certainly didn't see my script in real time. I certainly didn't even understand the concept of scripts yet back then because I hadn't developed the idea. Uh, but the reason that they're so hard to see is because they happen so naturally. We've memorized these lines so well. We know our parts so well that we do it without any conscious thought whatsoever. So we learned it as another language, right? Like we essentially, like as we were learning our first language, we were learning the scripts, the things that were going to keep us safe and protected, and the modeling that we saw and all of that, right? So there isn't a distance between us and scripts, right? We're not thinking, oh, I was taught to do this. We're just thinking, this is just who I am. This is just the way I am. This is what I do. And it doesn't happen. So, like, I walked out of that experience with the florist and I was very upset. That being upset made me realize something was wrong. And again, that's kind of where I started thinking about scripts and the idea of scripts. But realizing that it was negatively impacting me, not just protecting me the way that it had when I was growing up, was what helped me to realize I needed to do something different. So scripts don't feel like your personality. They feel like they don't feel like programming, they feel like your personality, right? They feel like who you are. But in reality, they're not. There is a distinction. Scripts are basically layered on top of yourself. And as you're able to manage those scripts, who you are will be able to flourish even more. How do you begin the process of noticing scripts? Again, this comes with that self-awareness process that I have talked quite a bit about. But a few things to recognize. One, those autopilot moments. So again, I remember going to the florist and I remember leaving the florist. I don't remember being with the florist. I don't remember the actual conversation because that script started, I was on autopilot, and I had dissociated because that's how I learned to keep myself safe, right? Are there situations like that in your life where that happens regularly? Is it, again, with certain types of people? Is it with certain types of situations? Do you get on autopilot? And what does that feel like? How do you begin to recognize that feeling so you can be more aware of it? The other part is recognizing emotional patterns. Okay. So, for instance, for me, right, other more important than self, I know that when I'm going to enter a situation where I'm dealing with someone else and what they want versus what I want, I need to be hyper aware of what I want out of this situation, and how I'm willing to essentially negotiate that with this other person. In the past, right, that was just a script, it just played out, and it was whatever that other person wanted. So being able to recognize these patterns that keep happening is allows you to then be better prepared and kind of essentially write your own script even before your script is triggered. And then identifying triggers. So there's situations, there's people, there's feelings that you have, right? So some people really struggle, understandably, with the sense of like helplessness is a trigger, not just like helplessness as an adult, but helplessness as an adult makes you feel completely helpless like you did as a kid when you were going through whatever difficult moments you experienced. So knowing that allows you to be better prepared for those situations. So it's not just people and situations, but it's also the feelings that you experience that you might not notice until afterwards. And again, it's going to take time to notice your scripts, and that's completely fine, right? Don't stress over that. Please, please, please don't judge yourself over that. You will get better as you build this muscle. So there's two things to really, and I'm getting towards the end here, which is so there are two features I really want you to understand about rewriting your scripts. The first is the fact that you have scripts is not your fault, right? You didn't do something wrong in order to get these. What happened was is your brain figured out what it needed to do to function. And the truth is, most of these scripts were probably really helpful for you growing up. I don't necessarily mean productive, but they were protective, right? They helped you survive difficult situations. They helped keep you safer, or at least perceived to be safer in threatening situations and scary situations. And I don't just mean with violence. I just mean where you, even when you feel emotionally scared, like someone's gonna be mad at you or whatever it is. And so it's not your fault. This is the way that your brain developed, and this is the way that everybody's brains develop. So it's really important you remember self-compassion. I did my workshop last week was on the science and practice of self-compassion. So if you want to take a look at my website, I'll show you the link later on. There's a recording from last week. It's free. You're happy to take a look at it. That might be really helpful for you as well. We don't want to add shame to an already challenging situation. So kindness, caring, consideration to yourself is really important. Just because you have those scripts doesn't mean that that's your future, right? You are not bound by these scripts anymore. You still may do them because that's what you've always done. It's going to take some time to rewrite your scripts, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can change that. And part of that is practicing writing new responses. Some of that is literally writing new responses, right? Thinking about just again, other more important than self situations. What would you write out to help yourself have a better script for those situations to prepare yourself? And then it's practicing that self-awareness so that you're building the pause where that you can really make a decision versus just reacting. And to me, this is the work of change. This is the healing process, right? It's permission to be who you are, not who you were trained to be. It's permission to stop living from the script that you were handed, that was written for you instead of by you. And it's permission to write something new and make it your own. This is your chance to be able to change your life. And I know it's in some ways it just seems like it's so simple, and it's certainly more complicated than it is because it takes an enormous amount of practice and effort, but that's something that you totally can do. And so I hope this has helped you really begin to think about that. I want to walk through some other slides, and then I'm going to there's a few questions and I'll address those. So first of all, thank you. I really appreciate you all attending today. And if you did like my workshop, which I hope you did, please feel free to rate it and review it on whichever, meetup or Eventbrite, however you found it. If you have any concerns about it, just reach out to me. Here are some of my upcoming wellness workshops. So next week, I'm looking into internal family systems, which is a great tool to therapeutic perspective for dealing with trauma. And so it's called the Whole You Learning to Navigate Your Inner Parts and Voices. I will be doing that next week. That's a free workshop. And then the week after that, I'm circling back to self-care. And so the focus is going to be on regulation and or restoration, how to know what kind of self-care you need. So I'm going to talk about regulation and restoration, and I'm going to talk about the 6 dimensions of self-care. And it'll really give you practical tools for figuring out not just why self-care is important, but what kind of self-care that you actually need. The week after that, I'm trying something new. It's what I'm calling a monthly Q&A deep dive. Okay. Because I think like there's an advantage to these workshops where you can kind of sit and be more passive and just learn. I do think there's real value in having a more engaging experience. And so I'm hoping these monthly Q&A deep dives will do that. In order to keep it a more manageable, intimate group, I'm charging a fee because Otherwise, we'll end up with a couple of hundred people, and I don't think that's going to be as effective. So I'm charging $20 for this. There's a 50% off sale for until tomorrow. So if you'd like to do it, you have today and tomorrow to sign up and join. And I won't do a workshop. It'll really just be, let's review the workshops that I've done. Do you have any questions? Have you tried these? Some of the tips that I give in the real world, what was your experience? Is there something else I can help you with? Kind of an in between before you really think about possibly doing coaching with me. And then I'm doing the art of sleep, how your daily self-care supports rest when you need it most. That's in a month. And that's a workshop I'm charging $10 for, just because the last time I did it, there was again, it was a very large group of people. And I think that this can benefit from a smaller group. So just charging a small fee for this. I have a meetup community, which presumably most of you already know about, but if not, feel free to join. There's crazy, it's unbelievable. There's like 3,700 people who are now a part of that. So I'd love to have you if you aren't yet. And then I want to talk a little bit about more. I mentioned this already, right? You can get the mental health starter pack. There's the self-care guide for people who don't know where or even why to start. There's rewriting your inner scripts. It's a starter guide to self-awareness and a no pressure guide to getting started with mindfulness meditation. These are free. You're welcome to go to my website and download them. You giving me your email, which signs you up for my newsletter, which I do once a week. And so there's that. There's one thing that I really wanted to talk about. So I've started a new program that I just recently developed. It's called From Scripts to Freedom. And it's a much more structured coaching program. There's 8 sessions. It really focuses on exactly what we talked about, but doing it for you, right? We're going to pick 1 or 2 scripts and we're going to work through them in order to really help you break through those and rewrite your own scripts. This is a pilot program. I'm only accepting 5 people for now because I really want to be able to focus on it and make it successful. There is an entire workbook that I've written that will also accompany with it. So you'll have the 8 sessions weekly, but you also, in between sessions, will have things to read and activities to do and practice. So it includes the coaching, it includes the workbook with weekly exercises, and then of course there's support because you'll be working with me. So if that's something that you're interested in, feel free to reach out to me directly or set up a call. I also just have a favor, if you don't mind. So I've also started doing wellness workshops for organizations. So if you think something like the self-care workshops or the self-compassion workshops that I do, the sleep workshops, if any of that might be interest to your company, I'd love for you to just reach out to me and maybe connect me to someone at your organization. I'd really appreciate it. I'd certainly be willing to offer discounts to some of my other services if that's something you want to do. Okay, so you can do that. Again, you can just reach out to me directly. I do coaching, as you can imagine, but I also offer a free 30-minute clarity call. It's hard to figure out who you're really going to click with. And so I feel really strongly that you ought to have a chance to talk to me and frankly see if you like me or not, right? So this isn't a sales call. I had a call today where someone talked about the massive changes that they were going through in their life and they just wanted someone to talk to. I don't know if it's gonna, like, if they're ready to be a full-time client, but they just needed a touch point, and it was a great experience. And I'm glad I got to know her a little bit. So if that's something, if you think you might be interested in coaching and want to try it out, it's essentially a mini session. I won't sell. I won't even let you schedule when we're done. I'll send you an email, and then you can decide what you want to do from there. I'm not into pressure, in case you haven't figured that out yet. And then this is my bio, which you can see in the when I send this around tomorrow. So let's take a look at some of your questions. So if scripts are trauma responses that we learn from the past to keep ourselves safe, can we compare scripts to our immune system? Just like how it protects our body from future infections. So, like our immune system, scripts are clearly useful, but we also know that some people develop autoimmune disorders. When and how do scripts become an autoimmune disorder? What kind of infection can trigger such response? Okay, I gotta say, Gabe, this is a fabulous question. I'm gonna take a brief moment to think about it. I think you're right. I think that originally, and this is kind of the whole fundamental challenge with trauma and healing from trauma, is that the things that feel like hold us back in our present, right? Those are the very same things that helped protect us when we were younger. We learned them, our brain developed them in order to help us get through a difficult time, to feel safer, to feel, excuse me, more in control, whatever it is. They were developed as a positive. It's just that as an adult, they're very restrictive. And so that's what these scripts are, right? And I think what happens is that transition between when we're in a more difficult traumatic experience growing up and when the trauma is in our past, that's when scripts become essentially like autoimmune disorders. They no longer serve the purpose of protecting us, they're actually restricting us. But unlike autoimmune disorders, we can become more aware of how these scripts play out, and then we can actually begin to rewrite them. So, absolutely awesome question, Gabe. Thank you. Um, Kay asks, do I accept insurance? So I do not. I do coaching while I'm trained as a therapist. I have a master's degree in social work and I'm licensed to practice, and I have a master's degree in family therapy. I have found that the work that I like to do doesn't really fit into therapy the way that I would like. I find coaching is a much more supportive, interactive, engaging process. And I find that it's been more productive for the people that I've worked with this way. The downside is I don't accept any insurance because you have to be working as a therapist to do that. Thank you for asking, Kay. So Dana says, excuse me, Dana says, you can see how going off script could really piss some people off. Take some bravery on our part to be ready for that. And so I'm going to just tell you a little bit about family systems. So I touched on internal family systems earlier, but family systems is the idea that all families are a system. We all work together. The way we communicate, the roles we play, all of that is similar to the way a system functions. And that's kind of the theory behind family therapy is family systems. And if you want to make a change in a family, you need to actually begin changing one component and then help the others adjust, right? So in a family, when you start changing your script, it it may cause disruption for other family members, particularly the ones that you were growing up with. I don't mean like any new family members, but family of origin, right? If you start changing your scripts, that's it's going to be a little disruptive because they're anticipating you responding a certain way. When you respond differently, it means that they also are going to have to deal with some change. And most systems don't like change. That's kind of how they work, right? So, yes, it does take some bravery and it takes some self-care to be able to really care for yourself in those difficult moments. Dallas, thank you. That's very kind of you. Um, Someone says I have a very deep-etched script belief that I'm not doing enough and that self-criticism seeps into every part of my life. It feels like more than a script. Self-belief. Any ideas how I can work with that? So, uh, I I will tell you my philosophy straight out. It is not who you are. That is the way that we think about shame. So shame is when we believe that we are fundamentally bad or wrong, right? It's not that we've done something wrong. It's not that we've made a mistake. It's that who we are is a mistake. Who we are is flawed. And that's what I think you're touching on here. This self-criticism that seeps into every part of your life. That's that is not a core self-belief because at our core, we're good people. That is learned behavior that has been picked up on. That is a script on how to deal with the various situations you've experienced growing up. So I think one, it's to remember that in our core, we are good people. And anytime that we don't feel that way, it's because we learned that somehow. Two, again, I know I said this before. I did a workshop last week on self-compassion. There's incredible research about the value of self-compassion, about what it can do in terms of helping change the way our brains work. And so I would highly recommend maybe spending a little time with self-compassion. Um, Kristen Neff is the pioneer behind self-compassion research, and she's done some extraordinarily work. But I would just reiterate that as deep as it may feel, it is still a script, right? That distinction between who we are and what a script is can be so hard to tell, but it is a distinction, right? You are not fundamentally flawed, but there is a script that has you playing that out. Um, Dallas, I would love to talk to you more about that. So please reach out to me. I'd love to answer any questions. Can scripts be internal thoughts you have to yourself? Like when you fear things, your brain reacts in the same way to yourself in your head. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And you would deal with it the same way. You'd notice it. You'd notice that you had this thought that triggered this fear. And then you want to be able to develop that self-awareness to be able to pause and go, okay, normally I would react this way, but what I want in this situation is this. It's the same skills that you're going to develop. It's just it's just more in literally more inside your head. Um, can repeating positive affirmations of who we're trying to become help us become more conscious and catch the negative scripts that impact us and change them accordingly? So, absolutely. And this is again, I maybe it's recency bias, but I'm going to talk about self-compassion again. There are some really good self-compassion affirmations. I will include those. I'll include a link to Kristen Neff's website tomorrow when I send this around, just because it's come up so much. And at least if you'd like to take a look, it's easier for you to find it that way. So she's got a number of self-compassion affirmations and practices. There are a number of apps that you can try that provide you with affirmations that I think are really valuable. I really, I adding an element of positivity to your life can be so helpful and positive. And so it's certainly worth giving it a shot. I used to think that they were just a little woo-woo, you know what I mean? But I'm sold. I'm in. So I absolutely recommend that. Um, Geraldine, thank you. Yeah, let's touch base after this workshop. That would be awesome. Um, What are the fees of the 8-week program? We could talk more about that. Um, oh, Miss K, I'll include it tomorrow. Um, Miss K, she asked about my website. I'll include that. It's also, if you're still watching, it's buildonyourstrengths.com. So you can go there as well, but it'll be in the links tomorrow. So don't worry about that. How do you know when you change the script if it's a negative change or a positive change? Oh, I would like to know more about what you mean by that, Luce. Um, if you're still here, please feel free to follow up with that question. Otherwise, I'm going to assume that you mean, how do you know when you change the script if it's a negative change or a positive change? Well, I guess I'm going to put forth that if you're making the change to that script, that you're rewriting it for yourself. So it's going to be a positive change. It's not happening by accident, right? You're determining what you want to do instead. So by that, you are making a positive change in your life. Maybe it's not as positive as you want right away because it takes time to make change, but just the process of being aware of your script and starting to rewrite it will show benefits in your life. So I think that's it. We're at 8 o'clock. Look at that. If you have any other questions, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A. If not, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Again, I will send around what will I send around? I will send around the recording of this. I will send around the slide deck, and I will send around all the links that are mentioned in here. And I will do my best to remember to send around Kristen Neff's website, so you can, explore self-compassion if that's what you would like to do, because I highly recommend it. I think it'll be helpful for you. For those of you who did express interest in the pilot program from Scripts to Freedom, please, 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 please reach out to me at my email address. And I will gladly talk to you about the process, the scope, the costs, all of that stuff. Okay. Um, Yeah, sorry. So Luce followed up with like if the outcome of the decision from the script is positive or not. And again, I think that if you're rewriting that script yourself, you're going to be rewriting it from a place that is healthy for you. And that's really the way I like to think about it, right? It's this, you're making a change towards health. You're making it, you're making whatever your response is healthier for yourself. And that's what really matters. Sorry, there's one other question. How can we tell whether scripts are simply preemptive protective strategies or PTSD response? Thanks. I would argue, I think, that there's probably not much of a distinction. Um, so, in part, you have this script because of the traumatic experiences that you went through. This was how your brain learned to function and survive. So, yes, they're protective strategies, but also they're connected to the complexity of your PTSD response. So I don't think the distinction really matters as much as the fact that presumably it started from a challenging traumatic experience or experiences, and building your self-awareness and learning how to rewrite those scripts is what's going to get you further along that healing journey. And Dallas, all I said was, and I hope it's pronounced Dallas. If not, I apologize. Um, is just to definitely reach out to me if you're interested in the pilot program. I'd love to talk to you about that. And you can either reach out to me via email or you can schedule a clarity call. I actually have time tomorrow afternoon that I set aside for those that might be interested in the program. So tomorrow afternoon, if you want, or we can talk about it next week. Okay. Well, thank you so much again, everybody. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your interest. And if you have any questions, just let me know. And again, I will send you everything that you hopefully need from this workshop tomorrow. Okay. Take care, everybody.